She walks past you in the airport terminal, mid-30s, maybe, tired eyes, average clothing, a forgettable face carrying a forgettable bag. You wouldn't remember her 10 seconds after she passed. And that's exactly why she's dangerous for decades. Cinema and pulp fiction have sold us a lie about female spies. The seductress in the red dress, the assassin in heels, the femme fatale who weaponizes beauty and leaves a trail of compromised men in her wake. It's a fantasy that feels true because it's repeated so often. But Mossad, one of the world's most effective intelligence agencies, knows better. They know that the woman who turns every head in the room is the woman who fails. Because espionage isn't about being seen, it's about being forgotten. The perfect woman spy, in the eyes of Israeli intelligence, is not the one who dazzles. She is the one who disappears into the fabric of ordinary life so completely that her presence registers as nothing, no threat, no significance, no memory. She has mastered the art of becoming scenery, background noise in someone else's important day. And in that invisibility, she operates with a freedom that the beautiful, the bold, and the memorable will never know. This isn't about denying that intelligence work involves deception, or even that appearance can be a tool. It's about understanding what kind of tool actually works. Mossad has learned, through decades of operations in hostile territories where one mistake means death, that the spy who relies on seduction or intimidation is the spy who gets caught. The one who survives is the one who never triggered suspicion in the first place. She didn't charm her way past security. She was simply never interesting enough to look at twice. Consider what happens when a strikingly beautiful woman enters a room full of men. With access to secrets, eyes follow her, conversations pause, people remember her. Worse, they create stories about her, assign motives to her presence, discuss her after she leaves. She becomes an event, and events get investigated. The moment you're memorable, you're compromised. The moment someone constructs a narrative around you, you've lost control of your cover. Intelligence work demands the opposite. You must be the person. No one bothers to construct a story about it all. So Mossad doesn't recruit for beauty. They recruit for something far more valuable and far more rare. The ability to read a room instantly, to mirror expectations without thought, to adjust posture and tone and energy in real time, so that whoever is watching sees exactly what they expect to see and nothing more. This is not acting. Acting requires effort, and effort shows. This is something deeper. It's the capacity to become genuinely unremarkable while remaining completely awake, to be dismissed while missing nothing. The agency understands something most people never consider. Every human being walks through the world making snap judgments about who matters and who doesn't. We assess threat, status, relevance, intent, all within seconds, usually without conscious thought, and those assessments are shaped by deep, unexamined assumptions. A middle-aged woman with a wedding ring and a slight doubtingness reads as safe. A younger woman who seems nervous and apologetic reads as harmless. A professional woman absorbed in her phone reads as self-contained, not interested in you. These aren't carefully maintained disguises. They're perceptual shortcuts that people take automatically. And the perfect operative knows exactly which shortcuts to trigger. Gender plays into this more than anyone wants to admit. In many cultures, particularly those where Mossad operates most frequently, women are assumed to occupy certain categories: mother, secretary, tourist, journalist, aid worker, wife. Each category comes with a set of assumptions about capability, intent, and danger. A woman traveling alone might be suspicious in one context, invisible in another. A woman accompanying a man often becomes an accessory to his story, barely registering as an independent agent. These aren't fair assessments. They're not accurate, but they're predictable, and predictability is exploitable. The exploitation happens quietly. No honeypot schemes, no manipulated affairs, just the steady, silent advantage of being underestimated in 1,000 small ways. The security officer who waves her through with less scrutiny. The asset who speaks more freely because he doesn't perceive her as a peer or a threat. The bureaucrat who hands over the document because she asked in just the right way, with just the right combination of deference and confusion. She isn't seducing anyone. She is simply allowing their assumptions to work in her favor, never correcting the false sense of safety they feel in her presence. What makes this effective isn't deception in the theatrical sense. It's patience. It's the discipline to never break character even when breaking character might feel satisfying or expedient. It's the emotional control to be dismissed, underestimated, ignored, and even insulted, without reacting in any way that reveals intelligence or pride or anger. Most people can't do this. Most people need to be seen accurately, to be recognized for what they are. The perfect operative has killed the need entirely. She has accepted that being seen accurately is the same as being caught. Mossad's training doesn't focus on gadgets or combat skills as the foundation. It focuses on the mind's ability to remain stable under the constant pressure of being someone else. The psychological stamina required to live inside a fiction for months or years without cracking. His self-awareness to know which of your natural behaviors will betray you and which will reinforce. The mask, and perhaps most critically, the capacity to isolate your real thoughts and feelings so completely that even your body language doesn't leak them. This is why the selection process is so rigorous and why so many candidates fail. You can teach someone to fire a weapon or plant a listening device. You cannot teach someone to fundamentally rewire their relationship with their own identity. Either they possess the rare combination of adaptability, emotional control, and strategic invisibility, or they don't. And the ones who do are never the ones popular culture would expect. The most dangerous spy in the room isn't the one who commands attention. She's the one you forgot was there. And by the time you remember, it's far too late. Because while you were looking for the threat that fit your expectations, she was already gone, taking with her exactly what she came for. The decision to recruit someone into intelligence work is never made in a single moment. It's made across months, sometimes years, through accumulated observations that the target never sees happening. A conversation at a university event, the way someone handles a minor betrayal by a friend, how they react when caught in a lie that wasn't theirs, whether they correct a false assumption about themselves or let it stand. Mossad doesn't approach people and then decide if they're suitable. They decide first. The approach is just confirmation. What they're looking for isn't what most people think. It's not brilliance, though intelligence helps. It's not bravery, though courage will be required. It's not even loyalty, because loyalty can be taught or leveraged. What they're searching for is something deeper and harder to name. A specific configuration of personality traits that makes a person capable of sustained duplicity without psychological collapse. The ability to live comfortably inside contradiction. To be to people at once and feel at home in neither. This quality often emerges early. A girl who learned to read her parents' moods before they entered the room. A teenager who discovered that showing her real thoughts made situations worse, so she stopped showing them. A young woman who realized that people underestimated her and chose to let them keep doing it because the underestimation gave her room to move. These aren't skills acquired through training. They're adaptations formed under pressure, survival mechanisms that became personality. And they're exactly what intelligence work requires. Mossad's talent spotters, called spotters for a reason, operate in environments where potential candidates naturally appear. Universities with strong international programs, volunteer organizations working in complex political environments, professional sectors where multilingual, culturally adaptable women tend to concentrate. The spotters aren't looking for people who stand out. They're looking for people who navigate complicated social terrain with unusual smoothness. Someone who switches languages mid-conversation and adjusts their entire effect to match. Someone who diffuses tension in a group without anyone noticing they did it. Someone who gets information from people without appearing to ask questions. They watch for emotional regulation under stress. A classmate makes a cruel comment in public. Does the target lash out, shut down, cry? Or does she respond with measured calm, perhaps even humor, in a way that deflects attention and maintains her position? Most people cannot do this. Most people react. Their hurt shows. Their anger leaks through. But some people have learned to trap the reaction inside, to let it dissolve before it reaches their face. That ability, that specific kind of emotional control, cannot be taught to adults. It has to already be there. Patience is another marker, and it's rarer than you'd think. Not the patience to wait in line or endure boredom. The patience to pursue a goal over months or years without immediate gratification, without external validation, without anyone knowing you're pursuing anything at all. Many intelligent people lack this. They need feedback. They need to be seen progressing. They need others to acknowledge their efforts. The ideal candidate doesn't. She can work towards something invisible, alone, for as long as it takes. She doesn't need the win to feel public. She just needs the win. What's striking is how many potential candidates never realize they're being evaluated. A professor recommends someone for a fellowship that seems academically prestigious but happens to involve working in a region of strategic interest. A woman applies for a position in a think tank or a non-profit with quiet intelligence connections. She's invited to give a presentation, introduced to a colleague, asked to collaborate on a low-stakes project. At no point does anyone mention intelligence work. At no point is she asked if she'd consider it. She's simply placed in situations where her responses can be observed. How she handles classified material when given access for legitimate reasons. Whether she mentions it to friends. How she behaves when tired, when frustrated, when someone challenges her authority. The observation isn't surveillance in the dramatic sense. It's simply attention. Senior personnel notice things. A young analyst who consistently delivers more than asked for, but never brags about it. A researcher who picks up on social dynamics in a meeting that others miss entirely. A translator who doesn't just convert words but understands subtext, hesitation, implication. These aren't red flags, they're green ones. They indicate someone who sees more than they show. Someone who operates a layer deeper than the surface conversation. One quality matters more than almost anything else, and it's the hardest to assess. The absence of ego in a particular way. This doesn't mean low self-esteem or lack of confidence. It means the ability to subordinate personal identity to mission requirements without resentment. To be whoever the operation needs you to be, even if that person is boring, submissive, forgettable, or weak. Most people can't do this. Their sense of self rebels. They need to be impressive. They need to be right. They need to win arguments and be recognized as competent. The perfect candidate can set all of that aside. She can lose the argument on purpose. She can appear incompetent if that's what's required. She can be dismissed and demeaned and return the next day as if nothing happened. This is why Mossad rarely recruits people who are hungry for power or status. Those drives are liabilities. Someone who wants recognition will eventually take risks to get it. Someone who craves respect will break cover to defend themselves. Someone who needs to feel important will signal their importance in ways that compromise security. The agency wants people who've already resolved those needs, or who never had them in the first place. People who are comfortable being no one. Childhood often reveals this. The middle daughter who learned to mediate between siblings and became invisible in the process. The girl who moved countries multiple times and discovered that reinventing herself wasn't. Traumatic but liberating. The young woman who grew up in a home where truth was conditional, where what you said depended on who was listening, and who learned to navigate that without moral collapse. These experiences don't damage everyone the same way. Some people break, some people harden, and some people develop a flexibility, a comfort with multiplicity, that makes them perfect for a life where nothing is quite real. The assessment phase can last years. The candidate might be employed in a legitimate role, doing real work, never suspecting that her file is growing thicker in an office she'll never see. Notes about her decision-making under pressure, her ability to compartmentalize, whether she asks too many questions or accepts ambiguity, how she responds when given incomplete information and told to proceed anyway, Whether she seeks approval or simply gets things done, all of this matters. All of this is being recorded by people whose job is to notice what others overlook. And then, quietly, the approach happens. Not with drama, not with secrets whispered in parking garages. Usually it's a conversation that feels like a career opportunity, a chance to do more meaningful work, serve the country in a specialized capacity. The language is vague but appealing. By the time the conversation happens, the person across the table already knows more about the candidate than most of her friends do. They know whether she'll say yes. They know what hesitations she'll have and how to address them. They know, with near certainty, that she's already been living a version of the life they're about to offer her. Because the truth is this: by the time someone is recruited, they've already been selected. The approach isn't a test. It's a formality. The real test happened. In 100 moments she didn't know mattered, and she passed every one. What breaks most people isn't danger. It's the waiting, the silence, the months spent doing work that feels pointless while living a life that doesn't quite feel like yours. Intelligence agencies have known this for decades. Physical courage is common. Psychological endurance is rare. And the kind of endurance required for long-term covert work isn't the dramatic kind. It's the ability to wake up every morning and continue pretending to be someone you're not in a life that offers no reward, no acknowledgement, and no end date you can see. Once a candidate is brought in, the real evaluation begins. Not in training facilities with obstacle courses and weapons. In quiet rooms with ordinary tasks. Filing reports. Attending meetings that go nowhere. Sitting in safe houses waiting for instructions that arrive late or not at all. Learning a cover identity that's been carefully designed to be boring. Memorizing the details of a fictitious life and then living inside it for weeks at a time without anyone checking if you're doing it right. This isn't preparation. This is the test. And most people fail it without realizing they're being tested. The failure isn't dramatic. No one quits in anger or has a breakdown in the hallway. They just become slightly less reliable, a little more impatient. They start asking when the real work begins. They express frustration that their talents are being wasted. They need to know the bigger picture, the reason for the tedium, the assurance that this is building towards something. And the moment they need that assurance, they've revealed a dependency that makes them unsuitable. Because in the field, there will be no assurance. There will be months where nothing makes sense and no one explains why. And if you can't function in that void, you can't function at all. Mossad watches for something specific during this period: the ability to remain emotionally stable in the absence of feedback. Most human beings are wired to seek external validation. We need to know we're doing well. We need to feel seen, appreciated, understood. We measure our progress by how others respond to us. But an operative can't rely on any of that. She has to generate her own sense of purpose internally, without praise, without reassurance, without anyone confirming she is on the right path. She has to be content with silence, and silence, extended indefinitely, is corrosive. Isolation comes in layers. Physical isolation is the easiest to endure because it's visible and temporary. You know you're alone because you're in a room by yourself, and you know it will end. Emotional isolation is harder. Being surrounded by people you can't trust or confide in. Smiling through conversations that mean nothing. Maintaining friendships that are partially or entirely false. Over time, this creates a strange hollowness. You're socially active but profoundly alone, and the agency watches to see how you handle that. Do you start reaching out inappropriately? Do you overshare with someone you shouldn't? Do you create emotional dependencies that compromise your judgment? Or do you simply adjust to the loneliness and keep moving? The discipline required isn't physical. It's the discipline to control reactions that no one else can see. You're told to wait, you wait. You're given vague instructions and no context. You follow them anyway. You're placed in a situation where something feels wrong, and you have to decide in real time whether to proceed or abort, knowing that either choice might be the test. There's no rule book for this. There's only the ability to tolerate profound uncertainty without letting it destabilize you. Some people need clarity to function. They need to understand the plan. They need to see the logic. The ideal candidate doesn't. She can act effectively inside ambiguity, treating the unknown as just another condition to navigate. What the agency is really measuring is emotional leakage. Everyone feels fear, frustration, doubt, anger. The question is whether those feelings show, whether they slow you down, whether they affect your decision-making or your behavior in ways that others can detect. Because once you're operating under a false identity in a hostile environment, any visible emotion that doesn't fit your cover is a crack in the facade. If you're supposed to be a mild-mannered academic and someone insults you, can you absorb it without a flicker of real anger? If you're supposed to be confident and something goes wrong, can you maintain the confidence without it hardening into rigidity? The range of acceptable emotional expression becomes extremely narrow, and you have to live inside the narrow range all the time. Boredom is its own kind of pressure. People underestimate this. They imagine espionage as constant tension, high stakes, adrenaline. The reality is long stretches of nothing. Maintaining a cover job, that's tedious. Living in an apartment where nothing happens. Going through the motions of a fake life day after day while waiting for something that might not come. The mind rebels against this. It craves stimulation, variation, meaning. And when it doesn't get those things, it starts to create problems just to feel alive. An operative who can't handle boredom will start taking unnecessary risks. She'll push boundaries. She'll engineer drama. And that makes her dangerous to herself and everyone around her. The women who make it through this phase share something difficult to articulate. They've learned to live without needing life to feel significant. They can endure routine, repetition, emptiness, and still show up the next day functioning normally. This isn't depression. It's detachment, a kind of emotional self-sufficiency that allows them to exist in a state of permanent low-level deprivation without seeking relief. They don't need the work to be exciting. They don't need to feel important. They don't need their efforts to be recognized. They can simply do the work, whatever it is, for as long as it takes. There's a coldness to this that makes people uncomfortable. It suggests someone who's disconnected from normal human needs. And perhaps they are. Or perhaps they've just restructured those needs in ways that don't interfere with mission requirements. They find satisfaction in small, private things. A task completed correctly. A detailed notice that others missed. The quiet knowledge that they're doing something most people couldn't do. It's not much, but it's enough. And enough is all you need. Handlers watch for breaks in composure that signal deeper instability. A candidate who gets visibly rattled when plans change. Someone who needs to vent frustration and seeks out confidence. A woman who starts showing signs of resentment when her contributions aren't acknowledged. These aren't moral failures. They're human reactions, but they're also disqualifying. Because the job doesn't accommodate human reactions. It requires you to bypass them entirely. To feel what you feel and then set it aside without residue. The test isn't whether you're tough. It's whether you can be no one for a very long time and remain functional. Whether you can live a life that's mostly waiting and mostly meaningless on the surface, and still maintain the focus and discipline to act decisively when the moment finally comes. Most people can handle intensity. They rise to dramatic occasions, but they collapse in the quiet spaces in between. And intelligence work is mostly those quiet spaces. By this stage, the group has narrowed considerably, not because people were dismissed, though some were, mostly because they removed themselves. They decided the work wasn't what they thought it would be. They realized they needed more connection, more feedback, more purpose than the role could provide. They left for good reasons, healthy reasons, even, because the ones who stay aren't necessarily healthier. They're just built differently, comfortable in conditions that would erode most people slowly from the inside. And they're still being watched, still being tested, because the final question hasn't been answered yet. Not whether they can endure isolation and ambiguity, but whether they can do it indefinitely, whether they can disappear so completely into a false life that even they forget where the performance ends, whether they can sustain the disappearance year after year, alone, with no one to remind them who they really are. Only a few can, and those few are the ones who move forward. The ones who remain are the ones no one remembers. That's the marker of success. Not a medal, not a promotion ceremony, not a story that gets told at retirement dinners. Just the quiet continuation of a life that looks unremarkable from every angle. A woman in her 40s living in a European capital, working a mid-level corporate job, occasionally traveling for business. Neighbors know her as polite but private. Colleagues find her competent but uninteresting. She has no dramatic backstory, no visible scars. Nothing about her suggests significance. And that's exactly right. The work she's done over the years will never be publicly acknowledged. Operations she facilitated that prevented attacks no one will ever hear about. Intelligence she gathered that shifted decisions in rooms she'll never enter. Threats neutralized so quietly that the people who were in danger never knew they were at risk. Her contribution is measured entirely in things that didn't happen. Bombs that didn't detonate. Assassinations that were quietly aborted. Networks that collapsed before they could act. The world looks at those outcomes and sees normalcy, luck, perhaps good timing, never the invisible hand that made normal possible. This is what people misunderstand about intelligence work at the highest level. They think success looks like action, a dramatic arrest, a public exposure, a headline confirming that danger was averted. But real success is the absence of headlines. It's a Tuesday that feels like every other Tuesday because someone made sure it would. The operative who achieves this understands that her effectiveness is directly proportional to her invisibility. The moment her work becomes visible, she's failed. The moment anyone suspects her role, the operation is compromised. So she moves through years of her life ensuring that nothing she does appears significant. And she does this knowing that no one will ever thank her for it. There's a cost to this that's difficult to articulate. Human beings need their efforts to be seen. We need to know that what we've done mattered. We need witnesses to our struggles, acknowledgement of our sacrifices, some form of closure that confirms the difficulty was worth it. An operative gets none of that. She can't tell her family what she really does. She can't share the stress with friends. She can't even process the experience honestly with herself because maintaining the cover requires internalizing the fiction. Over time, the boundaries blur. The person she pretends to be starts to feel more real than the person she was. And the person she was becomes something she can barely access. Some operatives describe a strange doubling of the self, a sense of watching their own life from a distance, as if they're performing it rather than living it. They go through the motions. They smile at the right times. They express appropriate emotions. But there's a lag, a slight delay, as if they're translating everything from a language no one else speaks. This isn't pathology, it's adaptation. The mind protects itself by creating distance from experiences that can't be integrated normally. And for women who've lived double lives for a decade or more, the distance becomes permanent. The perfect woman spy, by the time her operational life ends, has become someone who can no longer be fully known, not because she's withholding secrets, though she is, but because the person others would want to know doesn't exist anymore in any coherent form. She's fragments, different versions activated in different contexts. No single version feels entirely true, and there's no safe space where she can assemble those fragments into something whole. Retirement from intelligence work doesn't mean returning to a previous self. That self is gone. What remains is someone who's learned to function without needing to be understood. Someone who's comfortable being opaque. Someone who has made peace with the fact that her most important years will never make sense to anyone, including herself. Mossad doesn't advertise this. They don't warn candidates that the real price of the work isn't danger, but disconnection. That you can survive every operation and still lose something essential. That the skills that make you effective emotional suppression, constant vigilance, the ability to lie reflexively don't turn off when the mission ends. They become part of your baseline. You carry them into your civilian life, your relationships, your quiet moments, and you realize, slowly, that you can't quite remember how to be the person you were before. or if the person was ever really you at all. The women who do this work and do it well understand something most people never consider. Heroism isn't always visible. Sometimes it's the opposite. It's the willingness to do essential work in total obscurity, to absorb immense pressure without recognition, to live a smaller life so that others can live larger ones. The spy who stops an attack gets no parade. The operative who identifies a threat before it materializes gets no acknowledgement. She just goes back to her covered job, files her reports through encrypted channels, and waits for the next assignment. Her victories are silent. Her failures, if they come, might be the only thing that gets noticed. This is why Mossad's perfect woman spy isn't the one cinema trained you to look for. She's not dangerous because she's seductive or skilled in combat. She's dangerous because she's willing to become no one, to erase herself so completely that even people looking for her won't see her, to live without the validation most people require just to get through a normal day, to accept that her most significant contributions will never be confirmed, never celebrated, never even known, and to continue anyway, year after year, operation after operation, until the work is done or until she's no longer capable of doing it. When she finally steps away, if she's lucky enough to choose the timing, there's no ceremony, no formal end. She just stops receiving assignments. Her handlers move on to other assets. Her file gets archived in a system she'll never access. And she continues the life she's been living, the cover that's no longer covering anything. Except now it's permanent. The fake life becomes the only life. And she has to find a way to be okay with that, to live inside the performance forever, because there's nothing else left to return to. Most people will never know she existed, and the ones who do know will never speak of it. That's the contract. That's the cost. And for a very small number of women, that's acceptable. Not because they're broken or because they don't value connection, but because they've structured their sense of purpose around something other than being seen. They measure their worth by what they prevented, by the stability they maintain, by the invisible difference they made. It's a strange kind of heroism, quiet, thankless, impossible to verify, but it's real, and it's happening right now, in cities you've visited, among people you've passed without noticing. Women living unremarkable lives, doing unremarkable things, blending seamlessly into the background. You wouldn't remember them. You wouldn't suspect them. You certainly wouldn't think of them as dangerous. Which is exactly why they are. If this has changed how you see espionage, how you understand invisibility, how you recognize that the most important people are often the ones you overlook entirely, then you've begun to see what intelligence work actually is. Not what movies show you, what it requires, what it costs, what it means to disappear deliberately and remain disappeared even after the mission ends. There are more layers to this. More psychology, more silence. If you want to understand how power actually operates, how intelligence shapes the world you think you see clearly, subscribe to Spycraft Chronicles. We go deeper. We go quieter. We show you what's hidden by being obvious. The perfect spy doesn't reveal herself. Not even at the end. She just fades, and you never notice she was there at all.